You're sitting in a room full of people. Your phone buzzes with messages. Someone laughs across the table. And yet something inside your chest feels hollow, like a door left open to a cold wind that no one else can feel. That gap between being surrounded and being known, that's where this story begins. But to understand why that ache cuts so deep, we need to go back, not to a lab or a clinic, to a garden. In the oldest pages of Scripture, God shapes a man from dust, breathes life into his lungs, and sets him in a place where every need is met. Food hangs from the branches, water flows clear, animals roam without fear, and yet, in the middle of all that plenty, God says something strange. He looks at this man standing in paradise and declares that something is not good. Not the serpent, not the fruit, the aloneness. Before sin enters the story, before blame or shame or exile, God names isolation as the first problem worth solving. He doesn't hand Adam a book or a task. He gives him another person. That moment plants a seed that runs through every page that follows. The human soul was built for company. Not just any company, the kind that sees you fully and stays. So what happens when that company vanishes? When the door closes and the room goes quiet and you didn't choose the silence? Scripture draws a sharp line here that most people miss. There are two kinds of being alone, and they sit on opposite sides of a canyon. One is a gift, the other is a wound. Picture a man walking into the hills before dawn. The air is cool, the stars still sharp. He finds a flat stone, kneels, and breathes. No one called him here. He chose this. He came to listen, to pray, to empty the noise from his mind. This is retreat. This is what Jesus did when he slipped away from the crowds and climbed the mountain alone. He wasn't running from people. He was running towards something. Now picture a different scene. A woman sits at a window. Rain streaks the glass. Her phone is dark. No one has called in days. She didn't choose this quiet. It chose her. The silence isn't restful. It presses down like a weight on her ribs. This is the other kind, and the Bible never confuses the two. The ancient writers use different words for a reason. One kind of aloneness restores, the other kind devours, and the tragedy of our age is that we've lost the line between them. We treat all solitude as self-care and all loneliness as weakness. Scripture says neither is true, but here's where it gets harder than a clean split. Some of the most faithful people in the Bible lived in that second kind of aloneness, the kind that bites, and they didn't escape it quickly. David knew caves, not as a tourist, as a fugitive. The king who should have been sitting on a throne was crouched in the dark, pressed against cold stone, hiding from a man who wanted him dead. And in that darkness, he didn't write calm, pretty songs. He wrote raw cries. He begged God not to hide. He asked why rescue was taking so long. He described his bones aching, his tears soaking his bed. Psalm after psalm circles the same pit, the feeling of being cut off, unseen, forgotten. And yet, in almost everyone, something shifts. Somewhere between the cry and the close, David turns a corner. Not because the cave changed, because he remembered who was in the cave with him. That turn matters. It doesn't erase the pain, it reframes it. Then there's Elijah. This is a man who just called fire down from the sky. He stood on a mountain, faced hundreds of false prophets, and won. You'd expect him to march into the next battle with his chest out. Instead, he ran. One death threat from a queen, and he collapsed under a desert bush and asked God to let him die. The man who'd just seen the most dramatic answer to prayer in living memory felt so alone that he wanted to stop breathing. God didn't scold him. He sent bread. He sent water. He sent sleep. And then, in a gentle whisper on another mountain, he sent his own voice. Not thunder, not earthquake, a whisper. That sequence matters more than people realize. God didn't fix Elijah's loneliness with a lecture. He fed him first. He let him rest. And only then did he speak. The body came before the sermon. But no one in Scripture touches the bottom of this well like Jesus does. In a garden called Gethsemane, the night before he died, he brought his closest friends and asked them to stay awake. Just stay awake. That's all, and they couldn't do it. He came back and found them sleeping again and again. The one person in history who had every right to say he understood loneliness. He lived it in the sharpest way. He chose to walk into it with open eyes. And on the cross, he cried out words borrowed from David's darkest psalm. He asked why God had left him. Scholars still argue about what that cry meant. Was it true absence? Was it the weight of every human fracture settling on one set of shoulders? The debate hasn't ended, but the raw sound of those words, that sound is what reaches people who feel abandoned. Because if even he felt it, then feeling it doesn't mean you've failed. And this is the turn the whole story makes. Against every cry of aloneness, Scripture stacks a counterweight. Promise after promise that presence hasn't left. Think of it like this. You're walking through a long hallway with no windows. The dark presses in, and every few steps, someone carved words into the stone wall. You can't see them at first, but when you run your fingers along the surface, you feel the grooves. And each one says the same thing in different ways. I am here. I haven't moved. I won't leave. Moses heard it before crossing a river he'd never cross himself. He told the people that God would go ahead of them. The words are blunt. He will not fail you. He will not abandon you. Do not be afraid. Joshua heard the same charge from the same voice. Be strong. I will be with you the way I was with Moses. Centuries later, Isaiah carried the message to people dragged away from their homes. When you pass through deep water, I will be with you. When you walk through fire, you will not be burned. The promise doesn't say the water won't come. It says you won't drown. And the last line of Matthew's Gospel closes the loop. Jesus, risen, standing on a hillside, tells his followers that he will be with them every single day, all the way to the end. Not most days, not the good ones, everyone. These aren't scattered fragments. They form a spine that runs from the first books to the last. And for someone sitting in the dark, fingers tracing the wall, that spine becomes a handrail. But promises heard alone can still feel thin. Words on a wall, no matter how true, don't replace a hand on your shoulder. And Scripture knows this too. The early church wasn't built on private prayer. It was built on shared tables. In the weeks after Jesus left, a few thousand people in a dusty city did something strange. They pooled their money. They ate together every day. They opened their homes to strangers. They prayed side by side. This wasn't a program. It wasn't a Sunday event. It was daily life, woven so tight that no one fell through the gaps. They had a word for it, a deep sharing of life. Not small talk at a coffee hour, real weight-bearing connection. And they backed it with action, serving the widows, feeding the hungry, visiting those in chains. Service wasn't extra credit. It was the engine that pushed people outward when loneliness tried to pull them inward. Here's why that matters. Loneliness feeds on a lie. The lie that you have nothing to offer. That you're only a need, never a source. Service cracks that lie open. When you carry a meal to someone who can't cook for themselves, something shifts. You stop being the lonely one for a moment. You become the present one, the one who showed up. But let's be honest about the limits. Not every lonely person can just join a church and feel the ache dissolve. Some people sit in crowded pews and feel more invisible than they did at home. Some reach out and find only surface warmth. The early church model wasn't perfect either. Paul's letters are full of complaints about factions, cold shoulders, and people being left out. Real community is messy. It frays. It demands repair. The promise isn't that community will be painless. The promise is that it's worth the friction. And there's a deeper tension here that most talks about loneliness skip. Some people are lonely not because they lack people, but because they feel distant from God. They pray and hear nothing. They read and feel nothing. The room stays quiet. This is the kind of loneliness the Psalms wrestle with most. Not social absence, but the sense that heaven is brass and no voice comes through. Scripture doesn't sugarcoat this. The writers sat in that silence. They complained, they demanded answers, and yet they kept praying. There's something in the act of speaking into the void, even when the void doesn't speak back, that the Bible treats as its own kind of faith. not the faith that feels good, the faith that holds on when it feels like holding nothing. Picture a piece of pottery thrown against a floor. Cracks run through it in every direction. In some traditions, the repair isn't done with hidden glue. It's done with gold. The crack stays visible, but now it catches light. It becomes part of the beauty. That image sits close to what Scripture offers the lonely heart. Not a return to the way things were, a new shape, marked by fracture but lit from within. And this is perhaps the deepest reframe. Loneliness isn't just a social gap. It's a signal, a hunger that points towards something the world can't fully fill. Every human bond, no matter how rich, leaves a margin, a sliver of want that no friend, no partner, no community fully covers. Scripture suggests that margin is by design. It's the space where the divine is meant to dwell, not to replace human love, but to ground it, to give it a floor that doesn't shift. If this story stirred something in you, there are more waiting in this channel. Stories that dig into the places most people skim past. Subscribe, and the next one will find you. A garden, a cave, a cross, a table with bread. The thread that connects them is simple. Presence, offered to those who thought they were alone. And that thread hasn't snapped yet.